this is not my first presentation ever, but it's actually the first presentation I'm ever giving to a crowd of programmers. So, yeah, I know that lawyers are not really, yeah, your kind of people, but again, so who am I? I'm Maarten Truyens. I live here actually in Leuven. I was the one who booked the restaurants for those who participated in yesterday evening's adventurous dinner. And so my history actually, I've been a lawyer for over 12 years. I actually started in one of these big international law firms, you know, the one you see on the television shows, except it's less glamorous, of course. In practice, this is about negotiation of contracts, IT development, software licensing, outsourcing agreements, data protection stuff, that kind of document stuff that you really probably don't like. That's been my life for over 12 years. And so actually I have I think I was kind of the boogeyman for a lot of IT guys. So yes, I confess, yes, I know I will have to do some time in purgatory, but I'll try to make up for this because now I turned into a software engineer and an entrepreneur. So actually, I always dabbled a little bit in programming as a student, Delphi, PHP, C++ a little bit, but I never ever programmed full-time up to a few years ago. So, what is the software, the startup that I created? What is it all about? Well, it's about contract drafting, and so that's been my life as a lawyer. What does it look like in practice? Well, it's actually a very manual process. It's a process that I've seen a lot of engineers get involved in during a contract negotiation, for example, where they think like, this is probably not so hard, right? It's a bunch of text, it's a long document, but it's just a lot of copy-paste, right? Actually, it's not, and it is a really difficult thing to do, because the contracts really need to be precise, they need to be correct. Everything needs to fit together into a very long document, and this is just a lot of hard work. How is it done? Actually, this is not magical. It's just Microsoft Word. And you probably are thinking like, these big international law firms, they have something special, right? They do something. They have some internal system, something more fancy than Microsoft Word. Actually, that's not the case. It's really just Microsoft Word, typically in a very plain form, maybe combined with some content management system, but it's just Microsoft Word. And the problem is, lawyers really don't know Microsoft Word. They treat it like a typewriter. They don't know anything about the special stuff. If any of this numbering is not preset in the template, they're probably stuck. Half of them don't know how to do cross-references between between paragraphs of a single long document. Actually, just a few weeks ago, some consultant posted a review where apparently 1/3 of the lawyers don't know about the comparison, the kind of diff functionality that is inside Microsoft Word. So imagine that your $400 or $500 per hour paid lawyer is comparing a new version of the document he's been negotiating using side-by-side printed documents. That's reality for a lot of lawyers, just to set the scene what it's all about. So Microsoft Word is their environment, but even this environment is not so well known by them. And this is actually a very expensive process. Think about it again, 300, 400, 500 euros, dollars per hour, and a lot of this time is spent on grammatical errors, you know, just fitting everything together, finding the right clause, talking to a colleague like, do you have what I need? I need something in French, for example. I need something that is very balanced, or on the opposite, maybe you want something that is very aggressively written. Maybe you want something that is specific to a certain sector, specific industry maybe. And in reality, because of the primitive tools that everybody's been using, actually you go to a colleague, you search in your head, you go to some old file that you've been working on in the past, you take this, you copy paste it, you start to correct some grammatical stuff so that it all fits together, and before you know it, a few hours have passed, and this makes it all very expensive. And so that was the goal that I had in mind when starting this coding project, like this needs to be done in a much better way. So actually, maybe just for fun, there are not a lot of people who can appreciate this, because I know that the overlap between the two worlds of law and coding is pretty small. There's actually a lot of similar stuff inside. So even though lawyers are maybe not your best friends, they do share some of the same spirit maybe. So think about it. Actually, those who have seen these long documents, or maybe a licensing agreement or something, you may have noticed the thing at the right, like for example, a definition list. It's a bit like a constant. Or for example, the fact that you really try as a lawyer to make your clauses and your templates, make them reusable. It's a goal, it's an idea, it never works in practice, of course, like a little bit like in software development. But you know, this is the goal, and you try to really be able to copy paste a clause from one document into a next document, and that it still fits. Of course, it doesn't fit most of the time, but that's the idea. There's a lot of abstraction going on, a lot of information hiding. So some of these objective, object-oriented ideas are actually inside of contract drafting. But not most people just don't care. Of course, they just start typing away in Microsoft Word. So I really thought, like, is this something that that I can solve? Actually, that was the moment that I quit my day job. As an external lawyer, I became an in-house lawyer in the financial industry. I had a bit more spare time, and so for 3 years, I started researching technologies, like what can I actually use to solve this problem of making contract drafting better. And so I'm a bit of a language junkie, I think, and I spent 3 months with Python, with Google Dart, for example, with Ruby, with Haskell, really trying to see, like, would this be the right fit for my project? Actually, most of them, yeah, in hindsight, they would have never been a fit, because I really wanted something that also works on the browser side. And so all of these are actually server-side technologies, with the exception of Scala. Scala was close call, but the compilation just took forever, and so yeah. But I really spent quite a good amount of code on Scala, and it kind of rang a bell. But in the end, yeah, I didn't go. I didn't proceed with Scala. For the databases as well, I actually spend a lot of time on searching for a good graph database, because clauses are typically organized in a hierarchical manner, and that's why I really wanted to go for one of these more modern database. In the end, I just went for plain PostgreSQL. Why? Yeah, because of the language support. That was my finding with all the new tools. They were great for a lot of stuff, but I wanted to have multilingual capabilities. And for example, Datomic, which was a really close call as well, only supported queries in English, and that's a bit of a problem in my software. 2016, at that point, I really decided, like, okay, I'm going full-time, all in. I quit my job in the financial industry as an in-house lawyer and really started developing all day long. Actually, it's been a very hard period for me, you know, all by myself, just between the four walls of my home office. The only person I ever talked to during the day was the mailman. So that was pretty hard. I also remember that, you know, office life isn't great always, but at least you've got some stories to tell. And I didn't have a single story to tell in the evening to my wife, who's also a lawyer. And you can imagine just saying like, yeah, I had a new commit or I solved this bug. It's not really the most interesting story you can come up with. But I'm glad this period is over, and the end result now, the product is more or less complete, is actually, I think I did pretty well, over 100,000 lines of code. A lot of it shared between the browser environment and the server environment, because the contract needs to be shown on the screen during editing and needs to be able to written to a PDF or a docx file at the end. So I think this is really strong capability of Clojure, that this was possible in such a short amount of time. So my software stack, for those who are interested, it's nothing special for people in this room. It's plain immutant on the server side, Postgres as a database, a reframe. Initially it was Figwheel, then I jumped to Shadow CLJS just a few months ago. And then, yeah, Instaparse, for example, because there is a complete DSL inside of the software. So Instaparse was a very important part of this project. WebSockets support, Transit Spec has been a really big help for me. So the current status of the product is actually, funny thing is I was all by myself, but we have the most feature complete product in the market at this point. In fact, yeah, you know, and why this is not for fun, because I remember all the people in you know, friends who were like, yeah, you need to go for a minimum viable product. Why aren't you done yet? You know, this is taking so much time. But lawyers are used to the freedom they have in Microsoft Word. They don't know the product very well, Microsoft Word, but at least they think they have the freedom to do everything they want. You insert something here, you insert something there, and nobody's stopping you. And if you kind of force them into a certain format, suddenly, yeah, they feel constrained, and yeah, the product would never fly if the restrictions were too high. So that's why I kept adding feature after feature after setting, and so this right now, I think it's a pretty complex product, a lot of inherent complexity. The incidental complexity, as you probably guessed, is pretty minimal. But yeah, I think this is the status right now. We've reached the stage with the startup that we're doing integrations with other environments. So basically, the core product is completely done in 3 years' time. While doing some demos to law firms, we actually came across two similar projects where, you know, we did a demo, and then at the end the law firm said, yeah, that's cool, actually we want to share something with you as well. We were also developing something internally, and then your heart stands still for a moment. But then they started describing the project, and actually I have two similar stories from two different law firms. And so similar in the way with my product, similar between the two of them, where they were saying we had a three-person development team with a lot of help from internal lawyers, where they started developing something similar. And then they showed me the demo. You see that, you know, a lot of features overlap, but a lot less features. They were not done yet at the moment that they showed it. One of the two projects has been stopped actually in the meantime, because it wasn't ready, and they couldn't really get it ready for prime time. But interesting thing is, 3 developers, 3 years, not done yet, a lot less features. Why? Is it because I happen to be a domain expert as well, and that I just had to communicate between my left and my right part of my brain? Or is it maybe the programming language? What is it? I think it's the programming language. I think this is really a statement towards the strength of Clojure script, what you can do if you have both the browser and the server side with a lot of shared code in between. So what does the product actually do internally? Everything is a graph database, not only the way that files are structured, but also within a template, within a clause, everything is interlinked. And so you can really query like where is this word used, where is this data field used in the document, and so on. It's incredibly complex, it's incredibly big as well. This is an extract of a three-page document. It doesn't fit on two 30-inch monitors on your desk. It's very complex, but it allows you to do some very cool things within the software. So from a user interface perspective, this is the way that business users would use the project, would use the software to create documents. They fill in some stuff at the left side, and then at the right side, in real time, you see how the document appears. And so all the questions interact with each other. They disappear, they appear when necessary. So there is a full dependency cycle inside. This is the way that it looks for the lawyers. So it's completely different. So they, with a click of a button, they can actually swap a clause towards something else. And then all the conjugations that may be necessary will be automatically fit in. Like, for example, in English, this is not so spectacular, but in French, for those who know the language, there's an enormous amount of, you know, accents, small an E or an S that needs to be added or disappear, depending on whether it's female or male or singular or plural. And so all this stuff is done by the software completely automatically, instead of spending $400 per hour on doing this manually, as has been the case for most of the law firms so far. And so what they can also do in the database, they can really look for, like, give me an aggressive clause, give me a formal clause, give me a clause in English, give me a clause in Dutch, and then just do a search on this using some metadata. So this is pretty spectacular for them. This is the way that the DSL looks that I developed in Instaparse. Typically, I don't show this during a demo because lawyers are scared by this. It's just a way of configuring stuff. It's not meant for the average lawyer, in the sense that typically just one person in a law firm will actually be doing this low level stuff. It's a bit like the like a library author. You know, just a few of us are library authors. Most of us are library users. That's how this product fits into a law firm's development cycle. So few people work on this stuff, all the others just plug it in and click with their mouse. So why have I been so happy with this choice for Clojure and Clojure script? Well, I think the front end and the back end that are shared for a very large part. The fast development cycle, you know, Scala was a nightmare. It took, you know, you hit save and it takes 10 seconds, even at month 2 of the development test that I did. So I imagine what it would be like for 100,000 lines of code at this moment. So it's so fast. And of course, at the server side, it's a fast language. I don't need to explain this to you, but you know, even very long documents, they are being produced in less than a second. The competing product takes 40 seconds for creating such a document. So it's just been so easy in Clojure to do all this parallel stuff. Data structures, so all the EDN that flies between the front end and the back end, and which is so easily stored in PostgreSQL. It's been really a dream developing this. Adding features has been so easy because of the JSON and the EDN stuff, where you just add another field to the map. I'm really glad that it worked out this way. The immutability, that's something, just the other day I was explaining the experience that I had. I think like most of us had, like it takes you a few weeks to really understand like why? But once you grasp the concept, you never want to go back, and you only see the benefits. And like, for example, undo and redo, in a word processor this is really necessary, of course. And so there's basically unlimited undo and redo across the product. It's so easy to implement. Didn't have to do anything for this. The REPL, of course, I don't need to explain. Debugging, for example, has been very easy. Typically, I debug the big graphs that I showed you. I debug them within Clojure script within the browser. It's been so easy. I don't need a special debugger. Spec has been really good to get a little bit of comfort that it was correct. The community, thanks to you all, I really formally promise that as soon as the startup really flies, I will be contributing to Clojurists Together. That's been on my to-do list for quite some time. Of course, I'm not there yet. Lawyers are not the easiest to convince to switch, to use technology, but I think the world is changing. So in a few years' time, I hope you will see my list on the sponsoring list. See my name on the sponsoring list. The libraries have been really great quality, most of them. Instaparse, for example, I did quite some research into parsing libraries across languages, and apart from a specific library in the Scala community, which was really great, I think no tool exists like Instaparse, has been my finding, and it's been so incredibly easy to develop a very complex DSL with this, I think it would have been very difficult in any other language, in any other library. The ecosystem, don't need to convince you about this, all the PDF producing libraries are there. You can just use them. The JavaScript stuff and React, for example, it's been there. I've been very lucky to be able to use it. Macros, right now I have 6 different language versions. Like, for example, if you a law firm in the UK doesn't need French support, so in order to minimize the amount of JavaScript code that is sent over the wire, I have a bunch of macros that really figures out, like, is this language supported or not, and then just removes it if it's not necessary. So this kind of stuff in macros has been so easy to implement, would have been very difficult in some of the other languages. To call the complexity, I think the entire startup is a testimony to how you can gradually build software. And again, I've done some work as a student developing smaller software packages, but I never worked in a big team. I never worked on a project of this size, and it has been a pretty smooth ride so far. I've been adding feature after feature after feature, and I didn't really feel that the code base was getting dirty at some stage. Debugging, I talked about this. Types, I don't really miss them. Sometimes you're like, yeah, this could have been solved by some types, but spec has been a big help. And the refactoring, the few cases that it's necessary, it's been easy as well. Of course, there are some worries that I do have, like developers. Finding developers, it's not an issue at this moment. I can do everything that is necessary, just myself. But I hope that at some point in time, in the next year, for example, I will need the help of one of you guys or women. Probably this is okay. I saw 2 presentations, great presentations. One of them, for example, Alex Udek from another company, actually one of the very few companies that have a very successful startup in the legal community. It's a company called Kira. They develop data mining solutions for contracts. And so he basically said it's never been a problem to find a developer in the US, except if you just want to hire 10 people at once, then it's a problem. Some other person who was developing breast cancer diagnosis software, he was based in Berlin, and he said, like, yeah, actually Clojure has been a really good implied filter in finding the right developer. If you compare the the level of maturity, of expertise of somebody who is a plain Python engineer, for example, or somebody who is interested in Clojure, then you see a really big difference between them. So again, I have no experience with this, but they sounded pretty convincing, so I hope that indeed this turns into a reality. There have been some problems, of course, you know, it wouldn't be fun otherwise. Yeah, Clojure is a very opinionated language. Typically, you know, I'm very humble. I'm not a guy who will be pretending to know it all. So typically, I'm like, okay, I didn't believe immutability was a good thing at first, but you know, over time, you're completely convinced. Typically, I just go with the flow, but every once in a while, I just hate the opinionated stuff. And every once in a while, like just a small example, spec, for example, I had to write quite some macros to reinsert the feature that was initially there, but then deliberately removed, where they check on the returned data from a function. So it was there, and then it was removed, and I was like, oh, damn, I need it. And so, yeah, I had to rewrite a lot of stuff in macros because of this. That wasn't a lot of fun, but hey. Error messages, yeah, okay. Tooling, I really like cursive. Other than this, sometimes it's a bit of a hassle to set up, and I worry if other people join the team in the future, what it will be like, but let's see. Finally, I think, and I'll let you go have your lunch. I think the startup really proved that what Paul Graham, for those of you who don't know him, he's one of the founders of Y Combinator, the venture capitalist in the US. He was actually a Lisp guy himself. He had a startup back at the time, and he wrote quite some things about startups in general, programming languages specifically. And so he said that, you know, Lisp has been really the factor that allowed him to succeed in the marketplace. And I think I have somewhat of a similar feeling. I think just the other day I heard people complain like it takes weeks to add a feature. That's not been my experience. Of course, I'm just a one-person development team. I know the entire code base, but so far it's been really smooth ride. You add features, you add features, you add features. Clients are impressed by this because you can add something just in a day what they asked for, and they are really amazed by this. And this guy, Paul Graham, he actually in one of the Twitter posts, he was like, yeah, if history would repeat itself right now, I would go for Clojure instead of Common Lisp that he used at the time. So I think that's a pretty good suggestion towards startups. So thanks.